The small spaceship moved fast through the darkness of space. Inside, Eric Monroe sat at the controls. He was a young astronaut from Earth on a solo mission to study deep space. Eric was proud and calm. He had trained for many years for this. Everything had gone well for a long time. But then something went wrong. The ship shook hard. Lights flashed red. Alarms screamed in his ears. Eric grabbed the controls and tried to steady the ship. The computer showed a system failure. Something had hit the engine. He could not stop the fall. The ship was being pulled toward a planet below. Eric called for help, but there was no answer. He was too far from Earth. No one could hear him. Eric prepared for crash landing, strapped himself in, and braced for impact. The ship hit the surface with a loud crash. The metal groaned and bent. Smoke filled the cabin. Eric coughed and pulled off his helmet. His arm hurt. Blood ran down his sleeve. He was alive, but the ship was broken. He looked around. Through the window, he saw strange trees and blue hills. This was not Earth. Hours passed. Eric bandaged his arm. He took food and water from the ship and stepped outside. The air was clean. The sky had two suns. The plants were tall and moved gently in the wind. Eric walked slowly, looking for help. There was no sign of people. He was alone. After 2 days, Eric's water ran low. He was weak. He sat by a rock and closed his eyes. Then he heard a soft sound. He opened his eyes and saw them. They were tall, with smooth skin that shimmered like silver. Their eyes were large and kind. They spoke in a strange language. Eric stood up slowly and raised his hands. He said he was not a threat. One of them, a female, stepped forward. She looked at his hurt arm and touched it gently. Eric winced. She said something to the others. They nodded. Then she made a motion for him to follow. They took him to a village. It was hidden between hills and trees. The homes were made of stone and glass. Water flowed through small canals. Light came from glowing orbs. Eric was amazed. The people stared at him, but no one was angry or scared. The woman who had helped him was called Lyra. She was a healer. She gave him clean water and food that tasted like sweet fruit. She cleaned his wound and gave him a soft bed. Eric tried to thank her. She smiled, but did not understand his words. In the days that followed, Eric began to learn their language. He used drawings and hand signs. Lyra helped him. She was patient and smart. Another Thaurian, a male named Joran, was a leader in the village. He watched Eric closely, but did not stop Lyra from helping him. Some in the village did not trust Eric. They said he might bring danger. Joran listened, but did not send Eric away. He said they should wait and watch. Eric tried to be helpful. He cleaned tools, fixed broken things, and played with the young ones. Slowly, the people began to smile at him. Weeks passed. Eric grew stronger. He spent time with Lyra, who showed him their healing herbs. She was amazed when Eric used a small scanner from his ship to test the plants. She saw that he had some knowledge of science. Together, they found ways to mix their skills. One day, a sickness spread through the village. People got fever and could not breathe well. Lyra worked hard, but many got worse. Eric checked his scanner. He remembered something from Earth, a virus with the same signs. He told Lyra he had a small medicine supply in the ship, so they ran to get it. The medicine worked on some of the sick ones. Eric and Lyra made a new mix using the local plants and earth methods. Many people got better. Joran came to Eric and said thank you. His voice was calm, but his eyes were full of emotion. Eric was now part of the village. Children followed him. Elders greeted him. Lyra laughed more. She showed Eric a map of the stars. He pointed to Earth. She pointed to Velmora, their home. They were far apart, but now felt close. Eric missed Earth, but he did not feel lost. He had found kindness among the stars. He had been a stranger, but they helped him. He promised himself he would not forget. One day, he would return to Earth and tell the story of the people who saved a human's life. Many months had passed since Eric Monroe first came to the planet Velmora. He had become part of the Thaurian village. People no longer looked at him with fear. They smiled when they saw him. The children played near him, and the elders nodded in respect. Lyra and Joran were his closest friends. Life was simple, quiet, and peaceful, but Eric knew he could not stay forever. His body was strong again, and his mind missed Earth. He began to repair parts of his broken ship. It took many weeks, used pieces from old machines and help from the Thaurians. Joran gave him permission to go back to the ship and work there. The ship would never fly again, but maybe it could send a message. One day, the message worked. A weak signal reached deep space. A reply came after a few days. It was a rescue mission from Earth. A ship was coming, but it would take time. Eric told Lyra and Joran. They were quiet. They knew he would leave. When the rescue ship arrived, the whole village gathered. Eric stood next to Lyra and looked around at the people who had saved him. He hugged her and said goodbye. Joran shook his hand. Eric promised to remember them always. He promised he would never forget their kindness. Back on Earth, Eric became famous. He told the story of the Thaurians. People were amazed. Some believed him, others did not. Still, the government kept a record of the planet. They marked it as peaceful and safe. Years passed. Eric retired from space missions. Key lived a quiet life in a small town. Sometimes he looked at the stars and thought of Lyra, Joran, and the village. He sent messages toward Velmora every year, but there was never a reply. He hoped they were safe. Far away on Velmora, things were changing. The Thaurians lived quietly as they always had. But now they were being watched. A race called the Dravari had found Velmora. The Dravari were not peaceful. They were strong and greedy. They took planets and used their people as workers. At first, the Dravari ships only passed by. Then, they landed small scout teams. The Thaurians tried to stay hidden. Joran sent warnings to other villages. He told them to prepare, but they had no real weapons. They were not made for war. Lyra was now an elder. She still worked as a healer. Her hair had turned white, but her eyes were still full of light. She remembered Eric every day. She kept a small metal piece he gave her before he left. It was a part of his ship, shaped like a star. It was her treasure. One night, she sat with Joran under the stars. She told him it was time. She wanted to send a signal to Eric. Joran said it was a long time ago. He said maybe Eric had forgotten. Lyra shook her head. She said Eric had made a promise. Joran looked at the stars and nodded. They went to the old beacon. It was dusty and old, but Eric had once shown them how to use it. Lyra placed the star-shaped metal piece inside. It clicked into place. Lights blinked. The signal began to send. Again and again, it called into the darkness, hoping someone would hear. On Earth, in a space station above the planet, a young officer named Zoe Carter saw something strange. It was an old code, one not used in many years. She checked it twice. It came from deep space. She ran to tell her commander. Commander, Natalie Brooks, listened carefully. She checked the record. The signal came from the same place Eric Monroe had talked about, the planet Velmora. She called for a meeting. In the meeting, some leaders said to ignore it. They said it was too far, too old. Others said it could be a trap. But Natalie stood and spoke. She said the Thaurians once helped a human. She said Earth had a duty to help them now. Her words were strong. After a long talk, the leaders agreed. They began to plan. The mission was called Operation Echo Light. It was secret, so only those who believed in the mission joined. Many were young. Some had heard stories of Eric Monroe as children. They wanted to do what was right. The fleet was built quickly. Ships were loaded with supplies and weapons. Natalie would lead them. Zoe Carter joined as her second. Others followed. They trained, learned about the Tharians, and prepared for war. They knew the Javari would not be easy to fight. As the fleet left Earth, people watched from the ground. No one knew what would happen, but deep inside, there was hope. Hope that one act of kindness would now be returned. Back on Velmora, the sky grew dark. Javari ships blocked the sun. The village shook with fear. Joran told the people to stay calm. Lyra helped the young and the sick. They waited for help. They did not know if it would come, but far above, the human fleet moved closer. They saw the planet. They saw the Javari, and they remembered Eric's story. They remembered the promise. They were ready to fight. The stars watched as a new story began to unfold. A story of a human once saved, a story of a fleet that did not forget. The human fleet moved fast through deep space. At the front was Commander Natalie Brooks. She sat in her chair, eyes focused on the large screen. Her ship, the Starfire, led the others. Behind her were many more ships, all ready to protect the planet called VEL Mora. Natalie had studied the old reports from Eric Monroe. She had listened to the story he once told. She had seen the signal that came from Velmora. It was real. She knew they were going to help people who had helped a human. Long ago, she felt proud to lead the mission. Zoe Carter sat beside her, reading new reports. She told Natalie the fleet would reach Velmora in 2 days. The crew was ready, supplies were packed, weapons were prepared. Natalie nodded. She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were waiting for help. Back on Earth, many people did not know about the mission. It was kept quiet. Only a few leaders knew. They watched the fleet from far away. Some were unsure. Others waited in silence. But Natalie and her team moved forward with strong hearts. On Velmora, fear had grown. The Javari ships were bigger than anything the Tharians had ever seen. They flew low in the sky. They sent messages telling the Tharians to surrender. Joran listened to the messages and stayed calm. He told the people not to be afraid. Lyra worked night and day. She gave food and water to the sick. She helped the young ones stay safe. The people looked to her for comfort. She remembered Eric's words that humans could be kind. She held onto that hope. Joren stood on a hill looking at the sky. He saw the black shapes of Javari ships. They had not attacked yet, but it could happen at any time. He had no weapons, no army. All he had was a memory of one human who had once made a promise. In space, the fleet came closer. The pilots talked quietly. They were ready for battle. They had trained hard, but they also knew this was not just a fight. It was a mission of honor. Eric Monroe's story had touched their hearts. Natalie called a meeting with the top officers. She showed them maps of Velmora. She pointed to the Tharian village. She said that was the place they must protect first. She gave orders to the fleet. Every ship had a job. Every soldier had a role. As they got near the planet, strange signals appeared on the screens. The Javari had seen them. The enemy ships turned to face the humans. They were not going to let them land easily. Natalie gave the command. Shields up, weapons ready. The fleet moved into battle shape. Ships spread out like wings. The stars lit up with flashes of light. The first shots were fired. The Javari ships were strong and fast, but the humans were smart and well-trained. They used new systems and fast moves. The battle in space grew louder and brighter. It was a fight for a small world with peaceful people. Below, on Valmora, the Tharians heard the noise from the sky. They looked up and saw lights flashing. Lyra whispered to a child beside her. She said, "They came. The humans came." Joran ran to the beacon. He sent a short message. He did not know if the humans would hear it. He said, "We are still here. We believe in you." Natalie heard the message. Her heart felt heavy and strong at the same time. She told Zoe, "That's our signal. Let's get them out of danger." Some human ships broke through the Dravari line. They flew toward the planet. One ship landed near the village. Soldiers came out. They wore armor but kept their weapons down. Karen walked to meet them. The leader of the group was a man named Daniel Ross. He smiled and held out his hand. Karen looked at the hand, then took it. They both smiled. No words were needed. The soldiers helped build shields around the village. They set up medical tents. Lyra came forward. She saw their faces and tears filled her eyes. She touched the uniform of one soldier and said, "Eric." The soldier shook his head and said, "No, I'm not him. But I know his story." The village felt safer now, but the battle in space was not over. Natalie's ship was in the center. She gave new orders. She told the pilots to push the Dravari away from the planet. The fighting got harder. One human ship was hit. It fell toward the surface, but the pilots saved it in time. Another ship sent a strong pulse that pushed back to Dravari ships. The battle was long and painful. At last, the Dravari began to pull back. They sent a message saying they would leave. They were not ready for such a strong human force. They left slowly, watching from a distance. Natalie waited until the last enemy ship was gone. Then, she gave the order to stand down. The battle was over. The fleet had done what it came to do. Cheers broke out on every ship. People hugged each other. Some cried. On Valmora, the Tharians danced. The children laughed. Joran and Lyra stood near the soldiers, looking up at the sky. Natalie came down to the surface. She met Joran and Lyra. She told them who she was and why they came. She said, "We never forgot. He told us what you did. We came because you once helped one of us." Joran nodded. He said, "You kept the promise." Lyra took Natalie's hand. She placed a small metal star in her palm. She said, "He left this. Now it returns to you." Natalie looked at the star. She closed her hand around it and said, "Thank you." The sun set over Valmora. The sky was calm again. A promise made long ago had been kept. One human had been helped, and now many humans had come to help in return. It was the start of something new, a bond stronger than war, a friendship born in the stars. The sun rose over Valmora. The light touched the trees and the homes in the village. The people came out slowly. They looked up at the sky. It was quiet now. The black ships of the Dravari were gone. Only the soft glow of human ships remained. Above, Commander Natalie Brooks stood near the center of the village. Soldiers around her worked to fix power units and build strong fences. The Tharians helped them. They brought food and tools. It was the first time humans and Tharians worked side by side. Natalie watched as children ran past her, laughing. One of them carried a small human flag. A Tharian elder gave a flower to a soldier. The soldier smiled and bowed. There were no words, only actions. It was peace in its truest form. Joren walked over to Natalie. His steps were slow but sure. He pointed to a spot near the hills and said, "That was where Eric first walked with us." Natalie looked and nodded. She said he would be proud. Lyra joined them. Her eyes looked tired, but her voice was strong. She said, "We lived in fear. Now we have hope." "Thank you," Natalie replied. "You gave hope to one man long ago. Now we return it. Over the next days, the humans and Thaurians worked together. New buildings were made. Medicine was shared. Stories were told. Each group learned about the other. The soldiers listened to the soft music of the Thaurians. Thaurians watched human machines with wide eyes. In space, the rest of the fleet stayed close. They watched for signs of the Dravari tech, but the danger was not gone. Natalie sent messages to Earth. She told them what had happened and asked for more help. Back on Earth, people read the reports. News spread. The story of the Thaurians reached every home. Children heard the name Eric Monroe in school. People talked about the promise kept. Many sent gifts and messages. Some asked to go to Velmora and help. Eric Monroe, now an old man, sat in his home near a quiet lake. A young officer visited him. She gave him a small box. Inside was a star-shaped metal piece. Eric touched it with shaking hands. Tears filled his eyes. They remembered. He whispered. The officer nodded. They sent it back with a message. Ate said, "We remember you." Eric smiled and looked at the sky. Said, "Good. Very good." On Velmora, Natalie planned new defense lines. She knew the Dravari might return. She met with Joran and Lyra often. They talked about the future. They wanted to build schools and clinics. They wanted peace to last. One morning, a message came. A small group of Dravari ships had been seen near a moon close to Velmora. Natalie called the meeting. Her officers gathered. Zoe Carter showed the screen. It showed the ships moving slowly. Natalie said, "They are watching, maybe testing us. We will not wait." She sent a group of fast ships to follow the Dravari. They flew without lights, hiding in the dark. They saw the Dravari building. A base. Natalie sent a warning. "Leave this area or face action." The Dravari did not answer. Days passed. Then one night, alarms rang. A small attack hit a human outpost near Velmora's edge. No one died, but damage was heavy. Natalie stood in front of her officers. "We gave peace," she said. "Now we must protect it." She gave the order. A team flew to the Dravari base. They landed far away and walked in silence. It was not a full war, but a sharp strike. They hit the power core of the base. The Dravari were not ready. The base went dark. The next day, a message came from the Dravari. "We will leave, but this is not over." Natalie shared the message with Joran and Lyra. Joran said, "They will return." Natalie nodded. "We will be ready." She sent a call to Earth. She asked for teachers, builders, and peacekeepers. "Not just soldiers," Earth replied. Ships began to arrive with people who brought books and seeds, not just guns. Together, they built a new school near the village. A human teacher named Laura taught both human and Thaurian children. They learned numbers, letters, and stories from both worlds. A clinic was made too. Lyra worked with human doctors. They shared ways to heal. Lyra taught them about the blue flower that stopped fever. The doctors gave her a small machine to see inside the body. They both learned. Natalie stood on a hill one evening. She watched the stars come out. Zoe stood beside her. They saw human ships and Thaurian lights. Two worlds now stood together. Zoe said, "Do you think Eric ever thought this would happen?" Natalie smiled. "Maybe not, but he hoped. Hope is a strong thing." Lyra walked up the hill. She handed them each a flower. It glowed in the dark. She said, "These bloom only once a year. They mean new life." They stood together, silent, watching the night sky. The danger was not gone, but something stronger had taken root. Trust. In space, a small ship moved away. Inside, a Dravari captain spoke to his leader. "They are strong. They stand with the soft ones. We cannot break them easily," the leader growled. "Then we wait and strike when they grow weak." The war was not over. But the humans had shown their heart. Tharians had shown their courage. Together, they had defended more than a village. They had defended a promise. The story was still being written, but already it was one the stars would remember. Years had passed since the human fleet came to Velmora. The village had changed. New homes stood beside the old ones. Human tools and Tharian art were seen together. The two people now lived and worked as one. Children from both worlds played in the fields. Some had parents from Earth and some from Velmora. They learned 2 languages. They learned science and songs. They were the future. They had no fear. They only knew peace. Commander Natalie Brooks stayed on Velmora. She could have returned to Earth, but she chose to remain. She became part of the village. People trusted her. She worked with Joran to lead both humans and Tharians. Joran's hair had turned gray, but he still walked tall. He smiled more. Now, he liked to sit with the children and tell them stories. He spoke of a time before the humans came, and how one lost man changed everything. Lyra still worked as a healer. Her hands were slower, but her mind was sharp. She trained young Tharians and humans in the ways of plant medicine. She also learned from human doctors. Together, they saved many lives. A large hall stood in the center of the village. It was made of stone, glass, and metal. On the wall was a star-shaped piece of metal. Under it were words in both human and Tharian languages. The words said, "One helped, many answered." Beside the hall was a place for meetings, learning, and rest. People came from other villages, even other planets, to see the place where the story began. Back on Earth, Eric Monroe lived a quiet life. He no longer went on missions, but he still spoke to young officers. He told them about Velmora. He showed them the small star he kept near his bed. One day, a message came. It was from Natalie. She invited him to return to Velmora. He read the message slowly, his eyes filled with tears. He had waited for this for a long time. Eric took the journey. It was long, but he was not afraid. When he landed on Velmora, people gathered. They clapped and smiled. Children gave him flowers. Lyra was there, her eyes shining with joy. Eric walked with Natalie, Lyra, and Joran through the village. He saw how it had grown. He touched the stone of the new buildings. He listened to the laughter of the children. He said, "It is more than I ever dreamed." That night, a great fire was made in the village center. People sang and danced. Tarek sat beside Lyra. She gave him tea made from the same herbs she once used to heal him. She said, "You came here as a stranger, but you became family." Eric smiled and said, "You were the first to care. That saved me." Joran raised a cup and spoke to all. He said, "This man came from the stars. We gave him shelter. In return, he gave us the stars." Cheers rose. Music played. Again, the stars above seemed to shine brighter. Days later, Eric visited the hill where he first saw the village. He stood there alone for a while. Then Natalie joined him. She said, "Because of you, we are here." Eric looked out at the land and said, "Because of you, they are safe." Natalie gave him a small book. It held letters from children of both worlds. They thanked him. Some drew pictures of ships, stars, and people holding hands. Eric held the book close. Time moved on. Eric stayed for some weeks, then returned to Earth. He passed away some years later. On Velmora, the people built a small garden in his name. A stone there read, "He came alone, but left behind a world of friends." The bond between Earth and Velmora grew stronger. Trade and study missions moved between the two. More humans chose to live on Velmora, or Tharians visited Earth new. Problems came, as always, but now they were faced together. When the Dravari returned many years later, they found not one village, but a whole world ready to stand together. The Dravari saw that the humans and Taurians had made a strong alliance. They saw that the people were not afraid. It's time. They did not attack. They left in silence. The human fleet still watched the stars, but they did not watch alone. Taurian pilots flew beside them. Together, they kept the peace. In the Great Hall, a young girl from Earth and a boy from Velmora gave tours to visitors. They told the story of Eric Monroe. They showed the star-shaped mantelpiece. The girl said he was lost, but someone helped him. The boy said, and when they needed help, many came. It was not just a story, it was a truth. A message that even one act of kindness could change the future. A single promise, kept across stars, had lit a path for many, and in the quiet night, on Velmora and on Earth, people looked up and knew they were no longer alone.